Okay, it seems like we're live. Hello, everyone. And today I'm very happy to say that I am relaunching the Crypto Talks podcast. So from now on, once a week, I will be bringing interesting people who are in blockchain and doing not very standard things and are interesting in terms of leading conversations, in terms of the views they have, in terms of how they see this space and the amazing things that they are doing in this space. So today we are going to talk about the big hot creative topic in the blockchain space, in the crypto space, which are NFTs. We're going to talk about art, we're going to talk about crypto side of it, and we're going to sort of talk about the marketing and the blockchain and everything related to that space. So I would love to invite the amazing guest that I'm having here. Vesa, welcome to Crypto Talks.
Thank you so much, Ani. It's a real pleasure to be with you. I'm slightly preoccupied as I'm still posting this on Facebook and Twitter and a couple of other things, so people can join the live feed. I'm super psyched to be talking. It seems like we have a lot in common, and quite a lot to talk about altogether. And I'm very energized to do it, to be honest.
Yeah, awesome, great. So yeah, when people join, I'm monitoring the comments, so you can leave comments, you can leave some questions. We will make sure that we address them as well. I already see some people are watching at the moment, so thanks for watching, thanks for joining. I was telling Vesa that I've met him several times on different events in London, pre-COVID days when London was vibrant, when things were happening. We had many different events where blockchain community was gathering and having lots of interesting things to talk about. So Vesa was always there on the best events with his art, and there was always a big crowd around him trying to figure out what he was doing there and what was this art about. So I never had a chance to actually talk to him, although I knew who he was, what he was doing, etc. And I've seen loads of his art in different places so far. So finally, we got the chance from far away this time, but yeah, nice to connect finally.
Oh, for sure. I wish you would have elbowed some people out the way, because I wasn't always that busy. But yeah, that was so cool. I did spend quite a lot of time going through the rounds in London with the different events. I mean, London is such a luxury when it comes to, well, not now with the COVID stuff going on.
Unfortunately, yeah.
But altogether, like you have essentially 5 big kind of crypto events a week if you want to go and hang out and meet like-minded people. And very quickly, like during the last couple of years in London, it really was that my social circle was the crypto people, period. I mean, that's pretty much all the I didn't go much anywhere else. So yeah, it was a good time, and met a lot of very good friends, and of course, like people like James Bowater from Crypto AM, who still keeps doing incredible things, and he just he's I think today just said that he's migrating the City AM Awards to Dubai, and
yes.
Yeah, that's neither here or there, but anyway, brings back a lot of very good memories.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's start, I guess, from the very beginning. If you could tell what amazing things you're doing at the moment. So, I already mentioned that you're an artist. I already mentioned that you're in the blockchain space. But many people might say, how does these two work together at all? Like, what the hell is he doing? So for those who haven't heard about you, can you tell us what you're doing?
Before going into the creativity or processes or things like that often actually kind of, they're hard to even go to in a way that they're not narcissistic or boring to people. I think the real mission of what it is that I'm doing in the crypto space, because I've been a monetary activist, let's say from 2006, and even produced a documentary about the monetary system already back in 2010 with my own production company, funds and time and resources, and I've been quite the advocate for people to start to understand value, I suppose, from multiple different kind of perspectives. What is the fiat money printing system? Or if Warhol started the printer on art altogether, how did, like, for example, one of the things that I realized just a while ago, I can't believe it took me this long to realize, but when Newton took the gold standard off the monetary system in 71, I believe it was, that's when art started also reflecting, and sort of peak took a direction with Warhol of how he started with his literal factory to print art. So essentially, you could say that up until crypto art, our past 4 decades at least in art have been fiat art. And crypto art as a movement kind of stopped it. So in one way, you could say that a lot of the investment, now that the new renaissance is coming to space in the form of creativity and what it stands for, is that a lot of the investments of the past 4 decades of the art world are going to lose a lot of value. And when you widen the scope of it, I think the big picture is that in Italy of Renaissance, what we have right now is essentially the crypto Medici decentralized family of who are the ones who have the banking innovation this time. And what the OGs need to realize is that they need to fund the culture into existence, much like in the Renaissance Italy, Cosimo Medici did. In order for this country, in this case, the world essentially, or the coming metaverse, to come out of the chaos, to really make cultural landmarks in order for us to revitalize the world. Because if Bitcoin is anything, it's opening up the arteries of the whole monetary system of the world. And you listen to some people like Michael Saylor, or someone who's almost like a poet in the form of a businessman when he talks about all of this stuff. I mean, you can't help but to get inspired and energized, and you make art about it, or you like even NFTs. What I haven't heard up until now is that what if it's a way to fund bipartisan media? What if it's a way to start helping research papers in the scientific community to come out of their wilderness and what's been going on with the STEM fields in America and everywhere, because we have all of these crumbling institutions everywhere. And now it's almost like for the early OGs, it was already allotted that they needed to grow into bigger boots from essentially nerds. And I say this most lovingly, I'm a nerd myself. That they became business owners and they needed to all of a sudden hire 100 people and do things like that. But now the next phase is that they need to understand that they are the people who will fix the things that Bitcoin and they themselves critique. So the point is not for them to become the next Fortune 500 crypto magazine heads and make their 4th super yacht or any stupid Lambo bullshit like that. It's for them to assume responsibility for fixing the world as opposed to building their citadels. So
I think it's a very good point, because sorry for interrupting, but I just want to emphasize this point because very few talk about this. And every time things develop further, and every time Bitcoin gets to all-time high and has its bull run, many people focus on the price, many people focus on getting rich, many people talk about making money, and very few actually go back to the roots and talk about the whole philosophy behind it and why it was created in the first place. So what you're saying is very important, because very few just actually keep the focus on that and don't get distracted by the temptation and by the Lambos and everything else. Many people are in the space because of the Lambos, right?
Oh, sure. And I have nothing against Lambos. I mean, I'd love to fulfill a couple of childhood dreams myself along the way. There's nothing wrong with that. But especially because people pay attention to things that makes them survive and thrive, maybe, and then they pay attention to the luxuries. And because of what's been happening in let's say, the Nixon gold standard and how that reflected to art, because of all the things that happened to art ever since, no one serious has really looked for art for any kind of solution anymore. It's at best a sort of Gucci bag. type of attitude of what people have for it. And if you go a little bit back to what the foundations of art were, arguably the two oldest forms of art are body painting and cave painting. And people did them in a ritualistic setting to try and and because this is we're in a merciless biological machine, and we sort of die and we wonder what the hell it is that we're doing over here, and it's painful and weird, and am I gonna get children and married, or whatever, all of the worries in the world. And what art to begin with did was to help us connect to something bigger than ourselves, something that could be considered maybe transcendence, or help us deal with all of this stuff essentially, or to that is this biological machine and the kind of very cold often world that we face. So art had a very distinct purpose in helping us survive, but because it hasn't really done that function for a long time, or it's just portrayed something demonic or deconstruction or things like that, it hasn't really helped us elevate. And I think the real cost of that is that I think the quite disposable and sort of plastic art and these bananas on the wall, people can't see yet the direct relationship to the depressions, to the meaninglessness of life, or the kinds of crises of us as human beings altogether, or even in the art sense, our obsession with things that are kind of machine-like or soulless. So we're talking very big themes here of what the job of an artist is to go to the psyche of the whole space. And of course, in the crypto sense, it's to help in terms of the public relationships of maybe condensing art into a form that would communicate to those who are yet haven't really understood what Bitcoin is or crypto is. It's to help make impactful things that might invite people in to sort of realize what it is. It's one form of public relations, but and there are some similarities to marketing and PR, and this is why this talk is exciting, but it's also different. So there are overlapping things, but it needs to be able to be its own thing in a certain sense, and it needs to be respected as that, as opposed to just flattery or sort of Gucci bags. And that's what I'm trying to return into it, and then people will follow with the actual results of it, I suppose, and that can work in the benefit of this whole space.
Okay, yeah, it totally makes sense. I mean, the way I see this, and probably it's kind of, based on my previous experiences, the NFT space in general, I have a feeling like it's, just like back in the days, self-publishing eliminated all these agents, all these kind of, people who would decide whether you're good enough to be read by your future readers and to be published, etc., etc. And you could go to Amazon and just, put out your files and publish a book, and then the readers, if they like it, they would buy and read it, and you sort of bypass all these huge burdens of waiting for years and years to figure out whether anyone will read what you've written. Now it's again a very similar situation where you don't need an agent, you don't need a gallery to showcase your art, you don't need all these people to make a decision and make a judgment whether your art is worth whatever it's worth, or whether your art deserves for your audience to see it and enjoy it. Is that like the right kind of parallels that I'm seeing, or you see it differently?
Well, it's along those lines, but let's say in the current art academia, it mostly focuses on everything that I would now call fiat art. It doesn't take into consideration, most often coming from the cave painting days to, let's say, ancient Egypt, or the religious roots of art and transcendence, and all of the temples around the world, of what they were trying to describe and how they went sort of hand in hand was most of the world's spiritual practices and the art produced about it. And then you go to antiquity, you go to let's say the Enlightenment period, and everything, how it was reflected not only in the art pieces or statues, but in buildings, and buildings having functions and those kinds of things. So right now, it's been the printer machine went into overdrive, and it became sort of either activism of a very narrow kind, or then this sort of printing fancy things for the rich. And that's been the focus of the past 40 years, and that's why people don't really think of it as something very important, because the scope hasn't been widened. And what I'm trying to personally achieve and inspire in others is to look at what had been already achieved, let's say, in ancient Egypt. And it puts everything that we've done for the past 50 years as artists, it basically gets condensed into something like, what do we have to remember from this period of, let's say, the past 50 years? And it comes down to something like Damien Hirst's Shark, which is an incredible concept and kind of delivery. But when you put it into, it's maybe at best kind of like it is a transcendence of sort, and how we are magnificent beasts ourselves, and death in a certain kind of sense. But it's nothing, you put it up against Egypt and some of these magnificent things, we have nothing to write home about for the past 50 years. It's ridiculous. And we've sort of cuddled ourselves to think that what we have achieved is something magnificent, and we haven't. And now we are at the precipice of this new birth of metaverse, and this kind of renaissance that might be funded and fueled by crypto in significance, and returning some humanity into this kind of thing, even though it's going even further digital. But if we collectively understand a little bit more of what it is that we're doing, and how we're meant to be helping one another feel good, in the face of AI and automation and all these kinds of things. Why are we doing this? What is the value that we have for one another, and how can we connect better and have more functional families all together? I suppose that's one thing. But we of course we're going to get there by let's say now the NBA Top Shots and them tokenizing their moments and all of the kinds of things. And you just, like, one of my slides in Dubai when I gave my previous keynote was about NFTs in two ways. First of all, it's all the brands that are coming in, which is all the Marvel Studios and Star Warses and the film productions, the musics, the everything that we already know and have a lot of love for in pop culture and Netflix and whatever. They will tokenize their own culture, which is one thing. And you start to think of how much money that is altogether, and how we get to the trillions very soon. That's one thing. But what's more even close to my heart in a certain kind of sense is thinking that the government-funded institutional art has been quite, subservient to ideologies, let's say, the past 50 years. NFTs are really a liberation for you to be finally an artist, free to say who you are and what you stand for and what you want to do. You don't have to kowtow to an old broken system anymore. So that's wonderful. Then for digital output, for the most part, digital artists, ever since the dawn of computers, have been serving corporates. It's either, even if you're working for Pixar, you're still working for a massive company or a Marvel movie or something. You have the glamour of it, but you have very little personal freedom in terms of actually expressing yourself. If you're a 3D artist or even an illustrator or what, all of these wonderful creativity tools, even from painting, you can tokenize your paintings and you can make them move. You can whatever. The world's your oyster. So what it is a liberation of a whole creative class of people that is so much needed, that we have so many voices that stifle themselves because they're afraid that the old model of funding for their lives is going to dry out if they, God forbid, would bid themselves. And I think this is what I'm learning in the process of all of this. So that's the most beautiful part of it. And so you can have your Lambos and your money, fine, but let's also pay attention to what this really is and why it's significant, and how that can help the survival part in a different kind of way. Why are we surviving to begin with? Why do you stay alive? And you buy your second yacht. Let's get, how long is that going to give you actual pleasure?
No, I mean, every next one will give it a shorter time span of you feeling happy about it. Like, you get used to it at some point. So, like, the second Lambo will not really do much anyway. But
I'm just working on my first boat even, so.
It's very interesting. I really love this idea that, about liberation and being yourself, because yes, I do agree that a certain type of art or a certain type of artist may not be sort of, within those parameters of what expected and what is sort of commercial and what is something that the big corporations are looking for. So I feel like diversity of styles, diversity of expressions, and different sort of new types of things that we haven't seen before will be emerging as a result of that. And I think it's beautiful. It's really great. And the other thing is, I feel like this also gives a space for the artists to grow as well, because they will feel free to experiment without having that pressure and burden of trying to satisfy certain people, right? So plus you get this direct relationship with your audience and sort of directly eventually the people who will like your specific style just because that's how it is and because it's yours will be gathering around you. So you will end up being celebrated versus not understood and kind of judged by just because your style is different, right?
There's one thing that I used to have a very wide scope. Like, let's say when I did in 2013, I did a collaboration with my style with a Bollywood actress called Veena Malik, and we really made a cultural impact with that thing. But because it didn't sit with any of the narratives of the institutions, it didn't really get to ultimately do what it was designed to do. But we reached about 300 million people with something that cost 20,000 euros to make. And that was like on a global scale. And basically I realized throughout that process, and now it's honed for me to the point that I kind of made this tweet just a little while ago, is that one of the fascinating things about Elon Musk is that his current life mission is defined by a great irony that it's all about harnessing the power of the sun and reworking the whole energy grid. But then in order to do the Mars missions or the SpaceX missions, you need dinosaur blood in order to escape the gravity of the world. And I'm in a slightly similar situation, is that I've built such a thing that it requires someone really, really dedicated to take some time to learn what it is and why it's significant and what it can really do. And I think in a similar way, even though I'm all about the decentralization and the need of the decentralization, my sort of dinosaur blood is one Medici to come and look at what it is that I've done and funded, so I can really do what I need to do. Because right now the danger of, and what I would presume is a little bit the same problem as with marketing, is that when you look at true marketing, like let's say what BMW knows about marketing, how it's not about the product, it's about the experience. And what's been learned over in PR during the last, let's say, 60, 70 years or something like that, that it's not about the glamour of the person or the brand, it's about the experience of what it can offer, and all those kinds of things. They would not be easily understood nor appreciated yet in the crypto space because of the very short amount of time that this whole evolution has happened, and people, there's a big discrepancy in between how different crypto is as an island in the sea of the fiat world, and then what they need to understand about what's valuable, let's say about the legacy art world or the legacy marketing world, and how to integrate it all so that it becomes a very effective package. So that I kind of lost my train of thought a little bit there. You had some distractions as well.
It's nice you kind of made this segue towards the marketing side of things, and I do agree that in this space the marketing is kind of undervalued, the real one. So it feels like, these days, most of the projects are looking for shortcuts and quick fixes and kind of pumping and dumping and kind of, getting these short-term effects and then, replicating those short-term things over and over again. So it kind of, it stretches a little bit more. But at the end of the day, exactly the things that you mentioned are not really addressed. The experience behind it, the story behind it, the explanation of what the product's value is, like why did they even create it at first place who is it for, kind of, what does it bring and how does it change people's lives. So at the end of the day, what we end up with, unfortunately, is a very dry website with loads of terms, and people come to it and have no idea what the hell is it and who is it for, and then just they bounce out. So it's kind of echo chambering, people talking to themselves, people who understand this stuff in their own terminology, which just doesn't make sense, because at the same time, parallel to that, they're talking about mass adoption. They're talking about bringing people, from the non-crypto space into this space and attract them. But then how do you attract? By talking a completely different language, right? As a base, they have to understand what you're saying and then go from there.
Well, they have let's say many people have. I think I'm an anomaly, because I like marketing and communication. I understand the true value of it when it's done in high quality. And let's say people have this perception is that we have easily one of the punchiest spaces in the world. It's really the central banking system versus the emerging crypto lifeblood type of thing, and it's the biggest game in the world. And if crypto is to make its case, it needs to do it with truth. And they have an idea, many of the people who are running the companies, as in that marketing is lying, as opposed to telling the truth. But of course, when you're telling the truth, you have to own up to the truth, and it's actually something that is quite punchy. So the normal sort of corporate culture doesn't gel with the marketing of crypto at all. You can't just, as a company, go and hire a normal marketing agency who wouldn't understand what fiat currency is to begin with. They'd go like, but that's money, right? So you can't bring those people. It needs to be born from within the community itself for them to realize what their talents are and how they can incorporate it into the realizations of what they know about crypto already. And this would be one thing that I've been calling for, a new generation of a wave of art critics to enter crypto. They can't be the people from the old legacy world, because they wouldn't get it in a much similar kind of way. And people inside of the crypto art space are very like, oh, critics. I mean, those awful people who just bash new things and they're not open to innovation. No, not those. It would again be those people who are truly aware of art history and the connotations and technology and finance and all of these kinds of holistic things. And then this space for them to be born from inside of the community to help the investors and the sort of healthy hierarchy to be born in a better way, so that we don't have to learn the hard way, and NFTs don't have to become the new ICO, which it will if some things aren't critiqued and sort of course corrected a little bit along the way. So I've made myself persona non grata in many circles by actually saying that, hey, I get it, we're in a gravy train, but listen, like
no, I get what you're saying, because the thing is, like, we have like all these amazing things you're talking about around NFTs and the crypto art and the art in general, etc. But on the other hand, we also have like this, maybe it's my wrong perception, but my perception is that, the stuff that is more popular among the crypto community and probably would sell better as an NFT is gonna be like a crypto meme related stuff or crypto culture related stuff, which, some critiques may say that it's not really an art, or, it's not up to the quality that you would like art to be, or whatever is that, right? So there is this mismatch of, I don't know, like, what do you think? Like a really high quality artistic painting or anything that is turned into NFT, would it be appreciated enough among that crowd, or they just want to keep their culture and that vibe in the demand and kind of generation?
Well, there are some artists who are sort of even more suited, because I'm even though I'm a crypto artist and have been full-time and calling myself for that for 3.5 years and utilize the technology, and I get the space and I work for the space, there is a somewhat bigger mission that I'm on, which is the whole evolution of the Renaissance altogether, of returning art itself into a very different kind of sphere as to where it's been for a long time. And I know that sounds crazy, but I seem to be the one who's compelled to try at least mightily or fail in the process. But because of how it is that I talk and what I think that I've built and the transition of it, it's not yet, in my particular case, the NFTs are not yet well received. But the crypto art to begin with and the physical versions of my work were. So I'm still hodling on because my digital output has been, or my works have been digital originals for 12 years. So I've been waiting for this moment to happen for over a decade already. In order for NFTs to become a thing. And of course, from a multitude of different kind of points of view, but I'm not tokenizing most of my works yet because I don't feel like I haven't found those people yet. But behind the scenes, I'm working with a bunch of companies and a bunch of now new innovations that are going to elevate and bring them forth in the correct kind of way. And I'm just doing it patiently up until now. So in my particular case, not yet fully, or not even for the most part, I suppose. But there are people who are very well suited for them to do some of the virtual reality projects now, some of the expressions which are already making a bunch of money that are kind of energized very much behind it. Like they're fueling a lot of the things already. So it's hard to say crudely this and that, but in my particular case, I'm still waiting a little bit in order to be able to release them in a dignified way, because it's now a lot about novelty. It's whether it moves, it's fancy, it's this, and does it say about crypto? Does it have the logos? But let's say, in terms of the true meaning of the metaverse, when you really start to look at what the art is saying and how many layers there are to it, and how that reflects to the culture at large, what's happened before and what's going to happen, that can be said in a stills image. And in fact, that is what I've been doing for the 12 years. There's very few people who are looking at my work at the moment realizing that it's maybe this wide, but it's miles deep. So that's
I think it's just, we always have this, as artists, we always have this kind of I don't know, internal conflict or decision making that we have to follow up with, which is like you create what you feel like and what you want, etc. But that thing may not be commercially viable, right? So, like, for example, in the fiction space, in the last years, like, if you strive to write something closer to the quality of Hemingway, you'll probably not really sell the quantity of 50 Shades of Grey, right? Because that's not what people are valuing at the moment. That's what people are after, etc. So I have a feeling that in the crypto art at the moment, it feels like, we have a certain sort of standard of 50 Shades of Grey kind of equivalent for NFTs, which is this green frog with Bitcoin eyes or whatever it is. And that's what people love because it's part of their culture and of their community. But then very often you may see something amazing in terms of like quality and what you see in terms of actual art, but people will kind of, it may discourage the artist because from the very beginning, it's obvious that probably it will do not as good as the frog thing, right? So I feel like when you were talking about the critiques and all this stuff, maybe that was a new sort of way of trying to somehow balance out the thing, or I just don't know. I just feel like there is this balance, and it's everywhere. It's not only in crypto art, but as I said, like it's the same with fiction. It's the same with anything out there at the moment.
But that's what I mean about the whole wider mission of the Renaissance, because whether it's scientific or media or all of these institutions that we see now crumble, those who are not directly employed by the institutions, and even those in the institutions know that they're crumbling, but those in the institutions can't say it because their paycheck depends on it. And then, of course, we now have this whole thing of still that what is credible, what is trustable, and essentially the foundation of crypto truly is that you don't need to trust, you verify, you get the underneath sort of whole idea is that you build the foundations of trust back up again. And those layers, if that's the foundational layer, then this money that is coming into this pool, this energy, like Michael Saylor says about the conservation of energy and how that's going into Bitcoin, and the foundation keeps, the gravity keeps taking it. Well, this gravity is meant to be fueling everything that comes up from there that we would like to see in the world, as discussed before. And in my part, and the cultural side, what I'm trying to do is a similar kind of way, is just to make some things, of course, make a living and keep doing what it is that I'm doing, and keep increasing the quality and the depth of it and the meaning of it, but simultaneously talk about this same thing, which is that we need to rebirth the whole society. We need to fix the things so that even if you make your millions of dollars, you won't have 200 people with pitchforks outside of your house taking you down because they're pissed. You know, it's like this. It's not a comfortable thing, but it makes the Lambo moon have fun staying poor bullshit all the more horrendous. I get the frustration. I mean, there's been many people in the space who've been saying for 10 years that please look at this so that it will help your life, that you won't be left on a, like, without anything if this system collapses. And they were treated as lunatics and idiots and kind of conspiracy theorists, whatever you label. You were sort of cast out of society altogether if you started talking about this thing 10 years ago. And now that they still haven't listened, and now they're in their crisis, and now that you're making money, I understand that it's easy to say that, okay, you know, well, fuck you. But that's the worst thing that you could do. It's time to grow up into those big boy and lady boots to become the leaders that you thought that you were.
Yeah, because it's also like, you know, what I feel like is that many people don't really realize the level of their responsibility. Many people just don't get it, that they are responsible for many things, right? And if you know, they're responsible for actually explaining this in a manner that it's you know, it doesn't end up by you sounding like a lunatic, by you know, moderating your emotions when you explain stuff. Because let's be honest, like I totally get that, and I'm with you on the same page. But putting myself in the shoes of someone who doesn't really understand the space and who hasn't really gotten too deep into the thing and hasn't read anything about it, if a very extreme Bitcoin maximalist starts talking to you and doesn't even want to listen, and just, you know, just tells his stuff, and he's like, this is the truth, take it or leave it, I don't even want to discuss it, and doesn't put effort explaining things, that can be put off, right? Put some people off. So I do understand, like, you know, the passion behind it. I do understand the reasoning behind it and why people act that way. But I feel like it's also a responsibility to take from that side of the thing, taking into account who you're talking to and trying to sort of, you know, modify the level of the passion, modify how much you accept, modify sort of, you know, the conversation behind it, and try to I don't know, to make the story more relevant to the person you're talking to, right? Because you're not at the same level. You have to understand that, you know, very often, since you're not at the same level, it's very hard for them to get it.
Well, I think to begin with, what's so delightful about this conversation is that you're now, as far as I understand, you're evolving your whole concept of the marketing podcast into this very human approach podcast and a different kind of thing. But I don't think you'll be able to escape with your audience's perception being that this is a marketing podcast for a while. And in one way, I think this is the better marketing. This is how it should be done to begin with, is that people are actually talking about in a as adult of a way as they're capable, and contributing something that is truthful and punchy and makes sense, and it's not jargony. It's not something that goes about, you know, all the kinds of things that I can't stand when I start to hear that stuff. I have to switch it off now. So if someone wants to sell me something, if they want to tell me something about a product or whatever it is, they're going to have to show up as a human being. They're going to have to tell me things that make sense, that they're going to have to sometimes say things that are even uncomfortable for them to say, or, you know, somehow make it truly relevant or interesting. And you can't just hide behind the screen or throw a bunch of money at someone to make it happen or whatever it is. No, you need to show up. And that's, I think that is the true essence of PR and marketing, and to change that idea from the common perception of it being lying or trickery or something like that, to more like a conversation like this. In and of itself, this conversation is something that I think is something that many people should see and update their view of how to also approach people who have the capacity to do that kind of marketing and PR.
Okay, so you mean you're not offended that I'm not talking about layer 2 and cross-chain compatibility and all that stuff? Like, all those terms are very hot as well, just like NFTs. But yeah, I don't know what the guy means here, but I guess you know better. So just an update from your community, I guess.
Punk Rock Emilio is a longtime supporter. He's a collector, and he's a soul to be reckoned with in this space. Good to have you with us.
Yeah. Well, I agree with you. I agree with you that marketing is not about shilling a coin in this space specifically. It may work short term, but it's more than that, right? If you put the main principles of marketing into this space, I feel like it will be so easy for the projects that are ready to do that to differentiate. If you start, putting stories behind it, if you start putting emotions behind it, if you start putting real life examples behind what you're building and resonate better with who you are building it for, it will make such a better kind of case for you. And you will catch the people's attention. People will pay attention to you. People will, get curious. Once you trigger the right emotions, they will, pay some time to actually spend enough time to see what you're doing, and you get the chance to explain it to them. The problem is that many projects just put people off straight away by being so complicated in the way they explain things that the last thing that a person wants to feel is to feel like he's stupid. So at that point, straight away, they are being put off, and they're like, okay, this is not for me. This is like way above my kind of, intellectual levels. I really don't get it. I'd rather watch Netflix than read a specific book or watch a video about how blockchain works. If I don't get it, I don't get it. I'll just, wait until I see what happens next, right? So I just feel like that's the mismatch, right? We need the right bridges to put these two worlds together in a human way, where people just hear the right stories that resonate with them. Because the problem is very often, even when they try to tell the stories about themselves being a hero and building something that disrupts the industry, and they are this, knight in an armor, they came to save everyone, right? While what they don't realize is this: in that story, the hero should be the person for whom they are building that thing. They should, create a story around the audience. The audience should be the hero of the story, not themselves. The story shouldn't be about themselves or their product. It should be about that person's lives and how it's being changed, and what you are building, you are bringing to this person's life. It should be a story of a journey of that person, of where he is to where he wants to get. And you are the transformation. You are the person, who's helping him get from that point to the other point. And very often, I understand that there is lots of ego in this space, and I understand that it's very tempting to be this, hero of the story. But what many people don't understand is it's not about your founder. It's not about your project. The story is not your story. It should be their story. And I think that's where the biggest mismatch comes into place.
It's a it's a peculiar thing because I'm building a project with this new platform called Superworld, and I've been an Egypt freak for a long time already, and I'm fascinated by that culture altogether. And much like many cultures, when you look at their statues and their buildings, they built them very grandiose, and it was very much about the pharaoh and the glory and the gigantic size of things. But when it comes to Egypt, many of the, let's say the Sphinx, it points actually to the constellation of the Leo, and it's believed that it actually originally had a lion's head, and it was a time measurement device essentially. And the majority of the structures, as well as the statues and their mythology, essentially points to the universe. It points to, let's say, if the spiritual practice, if it has any meaning whatsoever, it should be the guiding process of how you realize that you go from being an insulated human being, no matter how grandiose your ego might be, into realizing that you are actually the universe. You're a part, you're like a drop of water inside of a bigger thing, and then you get connected into everything. And no, the size of your yacht won't help you in that journey. That is the ultimate reward for you to realize the grandiosity of life altogether. And I think the healthy amount of ego, let's say, that I need in order to not be crushed underneath the magnitude that I feel like what it is that I'm trying to do, as well as remain humble about it, because life will always put you on your knees if you can't sort of tamper your own journey in that kind of a way. And sometimes it's really good that it does that. But if the purpose, no matter how grandiose you come across, but you understand that you're in service of a bigger thing, then you're kind of in check with things in a certain way. And I think ego has gotten a bad rap in a kind of way that for some reason also we want to tear those down who tend to elevate, but then we also we emulate them, and we want that for ourselves, but we want our heroes to at least be working for all of us rather than just for themselves, because otherwise it's that whole greed Wall Street thing. And I hope we're pretty done with that, but it is seeping back into the bull run again in its rhetoric. But what I'm trying to say is that maybe it can be both, because I was certainly inspired by the, if you think of the Star Wars story, I mean, everyone knows now, the nerds with their plastic toys and LARPing inside of the woods as adults, and how sad that is. But essentially, if you know, the core of the story was that a guy called Joseph Campbell, he essentially gathered the myths from all different continents of the world, and he realized that they all had a similar structure with regards to how a boy grows into a man. And he sort of condensed this into a book called A Hero with a Thousand Faces, and that George Lucas then transferred into space with robots. But that's why it resonated, especially with young boys, so much, is that it's the age-old story of our growth into an adult human being, when all the different sort of institutional religions and churches were going down, and people couldn't find that thing there anymore. So it went for nourishment in that. So in my particular case, what I'm saying is that I do see myself as a bit of a hero in this story, but I also see how I'm not the only hero. So maybe in some way there can be an example of it, and this drive, and maybe there's a little bit of ego behind it. Of course there is. Everyone has it, but I'm no longer in denial of it. But I try and make it the servant of this whole thing, and to be truly inspired because that same thing is in all of us, and we can have that. So
yeah. No, I totally get that. And in Star Wars case, what I meant was probably that your role as a blockchain founder would be Yoda's role. Like, it's
right.
you're not the hero, you're the Yoda who is leading the hero and how.
Oh, that makes sense. Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, that's kind of, if you're looking at that analogy, that's what I meant. Like,
cool.
you play a role, and you play pretty cool role, but you're not the one who is getting into the transition, right?
Not Luke.
The journey of transition is your customer's journey, is your client's journey, basically. That's how.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, that's a great analogy.
So yeah, I mean, it's It's very interesting. I mean, we spoke about loads of concepts and looking at all these comments which I was putting up for those who were watching the live stream. It was pretty engaged. Like, things were happening over there. People were dropping comments in there, which means that it's always a good sign. But let's say, if someone is listening and they are artists just like you, but they haven't been in the space, they don't really know what it's all about and would like to learn more and to sort of, to get into this space, what is the best and easiest way? Like, where do you start? Because I feel like if they go to Google and start searching NFTs or crypto art, whatever, they may end up getting super overwhelmed with everything that will come on their way. So for those who want to get into this place, where do we start?
Well, my introduction was, I suppose, before anything, I got to see a couple of documentaries about how money works or how money comes into existence. So I had that foundation. But coming into crypto, my sort of sensei and Yoda, and I finally got the absolute privilege of meeting him in London as well, Andres Antonopoulos, the guru himself. He was such a profound thing because he's so uncorruptible, but also not so intolerant of some ideas. But he certainly punches you in the face with truth and a kind of perspective you've probably never heard. And he was great, but also to soften that up a little bit, but by no means saying that it's a soft ride altogether always either, is the Bad Crypto podcast. So Joel and Travis were the ones that I started listening to almost simultaneously as I did Andreas. And it's been a real pleasure to become friends with Joel and Travis as well, and doing projects together and whatever. Those are very good spirited people, and their whole team of how much they've contributed to people's understanding of the whole space. And their spectrum is, of course, 100 times more wide in a certain sense than Andreas is. Andreas is a very particular machine, but those two, you wouldn't drown in getting to sort of in the waters with those. But I think Andreas is certainly important to get the foundation with, because I really hope that there would be more artists who are now especially entering, because if you go to the Wikipedia page of crypto art, art movements happen very, very rarely, and usually those who make them, they're often friends with one another, and Gauguins and the Picassos and the certain periods and what happened. And crypto art really is the most important art movement now that is going on. But because of some corporate interest and of course some other things as well of how punchy it is and what it stands for, if you now go to the Wikipedia page, it won't mention anything about there being a horde of artists who came in to support the new money movement and this technology for the first time in world history. You won't find any reference to that. You'll just hear about some ETH tokens and some platforms and whatever, and basically the whole essence of it has been washed away. So there is. It's by no means even taken for granted that the world will ever know that there was such a movement as crypto art, because essentially the NFTs, for better or worse, it's becoming like this music television 2.0 as well, and a little bit speaking to our let's say the dignity of true marketers or true artists that are needed in order for them to be able to sustain and make what they do. It's not necessarily the most helpful advancement of how NFTs are now growing into a certain kind of direction. It's becoming a carnival as opposed to something that is a historic, important movement supporting like 3.5 billion people out of poverty and the arteries of the world opening. So there is a big struggle going on at the moment. So that maybe I wanted to bring a little bit of attention to. But if you don't mind, I have one point that I thought was important to share as well.
Go ahead.
Especially relating to this now old dying meme of your podcast being about marketing. because I remember how shocked I was at one point when there was this television series that came on Netflix called The Ranch, and it was all of a sudden it was more about the red state rather than the blue state, and I'd grown so accustomed to everything being sort of blue state point of view from television and Hollywood and that kind of a way, that it was a real shock to realize that there is like half of the American population is almost uncatered to in their entertainment. And all of a sudden there was one series that was more like, all of a sudden, like did a whole flip in a gentle kind of way, but represented almost 50% of the population. And I started thinking about this whole need of marketing needing to be quite punchy, and it can't be for everyone. You do need to know your target audience a little bit. And I'm realizing that even these big brands, let's say like Gillette and whatever, and they went very in a feminine direction, I would say, from the traditional masculine sort of campaigns of what they used to do, is that there's the majority of advertising and PR has been now catering for about 50% of the population, which is a massive hole in terms of like what could be done with the others, and how much probably pent up need and frustration there is that no one's talking to them in their brands or things like that. And of course it's very divisive, and I'm not for that in the least. But what I'm trying to say that, for example, coming into the crypto art space, trying to survive in the traditional legacy art world setting, it's super left, like super left, and you infuse that into yourself, and you kind of go into that church or cult in a certain kind of way, and you just don't know what you don't know. And then all of a sudden I got to know about Eric Weinstein and Jordan Peterson and Camille Paglia and a bunch of people who are sort of defined to be in the intellectual dark web, who are they're mostly Democrats, or they're mostly left or center, or a little bit tilting towards the right or something like that. But mostly former people who are left, and they started critiquing the direction of where some things were going. And then they sort of became this almost like an underneath thing where they started even saying some of the punchy, rudimentary things that people should know about conservatives, of what the value is and how it's not evil, how it's just another point to something that needs to have a balance in society in order for it to not tilt to either side and collapse. And that was such a delight as an artist to come into a space where our tradition is that we die poor, we do a lot of output, and then we die, and then someone takes our paintings and makes a gazillion dollars and whatever, and cut our ears off because we can't get the girl because we're poor. So that bullshit has got to stop. And the way that it stops is that you assume responsibility for your own finances, and you maybe understand about the conservation of energy, of what's important for you to realize as a individual human being, to take responsibility for some things. And crypto for me has been a platform in order to balance some things about the understanding of how the universe works that you might not get in certain pockets. So it really has been a balancing machine in a certain kind of way, but it also helps you see the whole overview of who you're catering to whatever product for, and what you're doing as a service. So I hope that comes across in the sense that I mean it, is that we do really need an overview of things. Because
I think we need like a high level, like full picture approach of a balanced perception of things, because I do agree with you, like we have two extreme viewpoints, and it's like one versus the other. It's like you're either with us or against us kind of thing, and things in life are not always black and white. So it's kind of, it's just like people advising to, I don't know, invest in one coin or the other coin or whatever. And then the problem is, like, when they give such advices, they never actually take the things into context. They never really take into account who they advise it to, right? Like, if you don't buy a Bitcoin right now, you'll die poor or whatever, etc. But do you know that this person
you probably will, though.
Barely. Yeah, but what I mean is, maybe he's barely just kind of, it's just about the situation in life where he's at, etc. Maybe he knows that, he just can't do that, right? Or whatever. I don't know. What I'm saying is that I think there is this need of actually going a bit up and looking at the full picture and putting context behind things versus just having an opinion and voicing it out and then having fights on crypto Twitter and just spending too much time with this toxic kind of arguments around with people who at the end of the day probably will stand to their viewpoint anyway. So it's at some point even meaningless just to just spread around toxicity. I don't know. I'm just.
I think like centrists altogether, or people with balance, they let the imbalance go for far too long, and then they got frustrated because it was like you're getting hit from both sides if you're trying to maintain balance. I mean, that's because being a centrist, you actually have to know the punchy stuff about the left and the punchy stuff about the right. And then you kind of realize what the middle is, so you can maintain that balance, so you don't go off course. And now it's a very frustrating place to be, because probably the most counterculture thing to be at the moment is to be a centrist. But to truly be it, not like in just saying wishy-washy whatever goes. No, it's actually like, these are the things that I stand for, and that makes sense for me. And it feels like the culture at large is a little bit like that the left is the divorced mom and the right is the divorced dad. They're utterly, bitterly, vengefully hateful from one another, and they've had a divorce and they're holding their kids as hostage. And you either go with mom or you go with dad, but dad's a piece of shit and mom's a whore. Basically, there's nothing in between. So the kids who are, let's say, the balanced people, they have Stockholm syndrome. And they don't really know how to go about it. They only have bad options at this moment. But I think the true moment is just to say that, enough of this. Well, we're all being bullied here just to be off kilter, and it's I'm done with it personally. That's maybe a part of this podcast right now, is just to go like, I'm so sick of the just like imbalanced people in my space constantly, and they think that they're ruling things.
I think that's kind of the awesome ending, because the way I was looking at like who to invite as guests for this podcast, now and in the future, is I felt like it's not even like, I don't even call it an interview, right? I'm calling this genuine conversations. I really want to have conversations with people, even if they don't share my opinions, even if we're not on the same page, but people who are genuinely expressing their personal opinions and are not afraid for voicing out unpopular opinions, because we've heard the popular ones everywhere. Like, we've heard it from all these stages in different conferences. We've heard it on different other podcasts. We've seen them write those blog posts on HackerNoon, etc., etc. I want something different. I want, to discuss stuff that is not usually discussed, and to voice out topics that are maybe even making people a bit uncomfortable. Because I feel like, people don't need another contribution to the noise. They don't need yet another podcast or yet another media which is going to tell the same thing over and over and over again. It's boring. It's just, I would get bored having these conversations, because why the hell I would even do that, right? There's plenty of it already. So thank you very much for, I knew it would be good, but, thanks for kind of, I think it's an ideal relaunch episode of the podcast. And that's exactly what I'm looking forward to. And I'm sure that you'll refer guests who are as interesting as you are for the future. So thank you.
Absolutely will. And it's been a real pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. And I'll be sharing this out and recommending you to a bunch of people. And of course, with regards to hoping that even the marketing side and the knowledge that you have with that, I think even though you're evolving out of it and in part this thing, I think some of those skill sets are very needed in this space. So with your permission, I'd like to promote that a little bit further as well.
Oh yeah, no, me and marketing it's part of me anyway. So I work in marketing and I work in this space. So it's not going anywhere. It's just that, I thought that this would be like a nice addition to what I do for work anyway, the whole day. And this would be like my personal kind of private project for my my passion project, so to speak. So I've just put out the website, anniealexander.com. So anyone who would like to join, I have a completely newborn, very, very tiny 3 people group on Telegram, where I'm hoping to add, the guests of the podcast and the listeners of the podcast, so we can interact with each other and sort of, discuss these things further. I will also probably have different rooms in Clubhouse, because that's the next crazy big hot place where people talk about NFTs among many other topics. So yeah, thank you very much for coming over. Thanks a lot for covering a whole hour of thought-provoking topics. I truly appreciate your time. Thanks a lot. Thanks for everyone who were watching. Thanks for your comments. Thanks for the enthusiasm. So I'm sure many people will listen to the podcast in the audio version, in Spotify, Apple Podcasts, everywhere else that it goes to. So thank you very much, and I'll meet you in a week. Bye, everyone.